So we looked at the 142 Pacer, which is a Leyland bus body on a railway chassis. But behind me here is actually a Leyland National bus. We're going to have a quick look around to see what the similarities are between the bus and the train. Now the first thing you see at the front, compared to the 142 Pacer, the windscreen's different. However, on the experimental vehicle for the railways called the Lev 1 rail bus, Lev just meaning Leyland experimental vehicle, it has the same windscreens. And as I explained in the Pacer video, the windscreen design was changed for the 142 Pacer for security and safety reasons. But very similar front to the Lev 1 rail bus, but slightly different to the Pacer train itself. But you've got a destination panel as well, slightly bigger on this one, although very similar to the Lev 1 rail bus. And as you can see, the real similarities come with the body itself, the steel body, the classic body of the Leyland National bus from Workington. And the body shelves that were constructed at Workington for British Railways were taken to the Derby Litchard's Lane works to be stuck on top of the rail vehicle chassis that were built there. So the final assembly was in Derby, although most of the vehicle here was constructed in Workington. And of course, British Leyland, classical here, the Leyland sign, very familiar to anyone from that generation. The other similarity as well is that pod here at the rear of the bus, where the heating system was more central on the Pacer train itself. And we'll just take a little step inside. You've got the twin lead folding doors, very similar to the 142. And as you go in, you can see the classic bus design, very, very similar to what we've experienced looking around the 142. And you can see with the seats themselves that the two cross, unlike the Pacer, which is a slightly wider body shell, the 142 Pacer is at least, where you had 3 seats on one side and 2 on the other, but essentially it's a similar thing. The windows as well, there's fewer openable windows on the bus as there is on the train. And finally we'll just sweep around this very quick tour of the bus. The cab, even smaller of course than the cab on the Pacer itself, and we'll hear a little bit about that in a moment. But very neat, tidy, but absolutely recognisable as a Pacer. And of course your destination panels are up here, just as they are exactly on the 142 Pacer. So we've had a little tour around the bus, but now we're going to find out a bit more about it from Craig from the Leyland National Restoration Group, who very kindly brought a Leyland National bus here to Shildon today. So Craig, thank you very much first of all for bringing
no problem at all.
The bus here. Now obviously we've just looked at the train, very, very similar.
Yeah.
Why did British Rail go for the bus body?
Well, this vehicle is what's called integral construction, which means the side panels form a structure for the bus. That means it's so strong that if it took an impact anywhere, you could just bounce off and repair it and it would be great.
Yeah.
So it hasn't got an actual chassis to it. Yeah. It's got 2 subframes, which leads it to rail-borne engineering. And
presumably that also makes it easier to maintain and overhaul and so on, yeah.
Yeah, I mean this bus was designed for maintenance in its construction. Yeah. So this can basically be tore down like a huge Meccano set and rebuilt.
So but in 1985 when the 142 Pacer came out,
yeah,
that was the year the last of these was being built. So
that's correct, yes.
Does that seem a bit strange that they were finishing the buses and then moving on to the trains?
A little bit, yeah, a little bit, but you've got to understand where these were built in Workington was where your 142 was also constructed. Yeah. So all the construction techniques that were used on this were used in your 142.
Okay. We've got this as a Leyland National 2, I think it says down here.
Leyland National 2.
And of course we've the Leyland National 1, which came out in the early 1970s.
Yeah.
So what's the big difference between those two? And which one is the one that's in the Pacer?
Well, the Pacer was based on this, but your original Leyland National was actually looked at as real as well because of Lev 1, which was a single-engined rail car. But the reason why they went for this is because all the parts were readily available, straight off the shelf, straight from Workington. They had contracts with everybody, so you could just end production of this and then start straight away with your Pacer.
And of course, at that time, British Rail was a nationalised industry, British Leyland nationalised industry, National Bus Company being nationalised industry as well. So it's bringing it all together. How many of the buses were built in the end?
Of these, you're looking at well over 500, but the National as a whole, if you obviously factor in your export, you're looking at well over 2,000.
Just to sort of finish off, I mean, what is the sort of legacy of this bus? I mean, what's its importance in terms of transport history in this country?
I mean, this is obviously an ex-Northern vehicle, and there were 60 of these built, and there's only 3 of them survive. We own 2 of them at the NNRG, and a good friend of ours owns the other one. But I mean, for this, if you ask anybody who I would say 30 plus to draw a Northern bus, they will draw one of these. They will draw one of these.
And I guess when these were operational, the Pacer was running, so you go to the station in a bus, you'd arrive on one of these and you get onto another version of it on the rails.
Yeah, well, Darlington Station, you had these pulling up outside, and then you went to the rail-borne version of this on the tracks.
Yeah.
So they literally, it's all in hand, isn't it?
So the Leyland National Bus and the Class 142 Pacer, and all the types of Pacer, are interchangeable in both forms of transport.
They're all from the same family.
From the same family. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for bringing it in.
No problem. Thank you for inviting us.